So today I am here with my friend Martin, who I talk about all the time, and I tag him on process over prize posts because you really believe that, and I love that approach to training for you. So let's talk about your jiu-jitsu journey. You're a black belt. How long have you been training?
Total about 14 years now. So I wrestled growing up. I really started training like submission grappling or jiu-jitsu 2008 in the Marine Corps, and then from there, everywhere, every duty station I've gone to, I've gone transitioned from gym to gym, training. In
How does that? Because you are still active duty.
I am
Marine Corps, and you're based in California now. How has that been with different duty stations? Just integrating into a new gym, because so many of us are attached to our home gym.
It's surprisingly, it's been good. You kind of hear horror stories of people going from gym to gym, kind of starting over from scratch or not really getting a warm welcome. But I've gone to gyms mostly around like Marine Corps bases, so I've had friends that recommended. So before I got to the gym, I knew some people. I had trained with people that used to train in that gym, or I kind of knew the people that were there. So it wasn't always an awkward transition for me.
How do you handle that going into a new gym? Do you try to go early, introduce yourself to the professors? Like, for people who may be experiencing that and nervous about making that transition, what have you found to be the most effective way to introduce yourself to a new school and get incorporated into their program?
Yeah, just reach out. First and foremost, I try to find somebody, like I said, that has trained there or is currently training there. That way I know familiar face going in. But if it's somewhere where it's brand new, I just reach out and say, hey, I'm here for this amount of time, or I'm just here passing through. You mind if I drop in? And I've always been welcomed into the gyms I've gone to.
But you consistently still train with Fredson.
I do. Yes, I started training with Tulsa in North Carolina, which was one of his affiliates. And that was after years, going from gym to gym. And once I got there, I was a purple belt at the time. I trained with Tulsa for a while, and Fredson would fly out and do seminars, and that's when I first met him. And I've been
because you guys are friends.
Yeah, I've been with Fredson Fresh Out affiliate ever since.
How? Because one thing I've noticed too with you is being a black belt, being at that high level, getting the continuity and the consistency of training to maintain that skill set. When you're training and helping lower belts succeed, but who pushes you? How does that dynamic work for you?
You learn a lot from teaching, and I didn't realize that until I started teaching more. But when you're teaching different people, different ability groups, different ages, different levels of training, whether they're just recreational in jiu-jitsu or they actually train competitively to compete, you learn a lot about yourself and about jiu-jitsu by researching and studying. So after I started teaching more, I found myself like researching and studying more. I was more of a student when it was just me soaking up all the knowledge.
So like, it sounds like almost as a teacher you're taking more responsibility to have the knowledge for whatever their attachment point to the sport is, to help them connect more. Versus as a practitioner, the most important thing is what your personal connection point is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in teaching people with different physicalities, has that helped you see different ways as a practitioner to be more effective?
It has. There's certain positions, certain techniques that I I knew but kind of discredited because it didn't fit into my style per se.
Or it didn't flow as easily.
Yeah, it didn't work as much. As easy for me. But I found myself like going back now, like, man, I did this as a blue belt, or I saw this as a blue belt. I just kind of like shelved it in my memory and never, pulled it off. So, but yeah, you definitely learn a lot more about yourself and about people.
How do you? So like today we had an open mat, which we had one of those conversations because we had Orion, who's huge.
Yeah.
He's very, very tall, very skinny, very flexible, and that can be a challenge. But even he said, we were joking about a position that he can very easily do for control, and he's like, yeah, I kind of stopped doing it just because I wanted to work on other things, and it created a great conversation of really practicing technique and things like that. When you look at, say, open mat versus a training session, a class, how do you differentiate that within the jiu-jitsu community, especially if someone new coming in wants to say, when do I approach doing open mats?
Yeah, I would say the big difference is just open mat is more so like that's your time to like try out all the cool stuff that you've been working on.
A little more low key.
Yeah, more low key, more informal, and it's cool to have people from outside come in. You know, open mat is normally like open for other people to come in from different gyms, and you see different styles, you see different techniques that people use, different positions. That's your time for me to like try out new stuff or just kind of like hang out. You know, learn new stuff or talk to people, maybe focus on a position that you've been training throughout the week. Because class is more so structured. You know, you come in, you do your warm up. This is the technique. This may be the series. You know, I've been to places where, for a month, you're focused on this position, whether it be close guard, top, bottom, half guard, whatever. And then throughout that month, you break down into different positions or submissions. So normally during the week, it's more structured. Hey, this is the technique. This is a position we're working on. We're drilling. You do some rolling at the end to kind of reinforce. And open mat is just like whatever, Like I worked on this last month, I want to, go back to this and kind of iron out some details.
I think that is so key too, because I'm starting to view open mat as more of an opportunity to say whichever technique we worked on throughout the week, if I just need more repetition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what do you find in that process too of the repetition as far as having a training partner to practice to? Because I find for me, if I can practice just by myself, it's not going to be as effective as if I practice on an actual body.
Yeah.
How do you get that time in with training partners?
So it helps obviously when you do have somebody, but never discredit just an individual movement or individual flow by yourself, where you're mentally thinking about the position, you're controlling your body. You can kind of set the foundation there, but you absolutely need to have somebody to get the response when you're going from position to position, and ultimately you want some resistance. So you kind of work your way up to like where you're rolling, 50, 75%, where you want a little bit of resistance. You want to see if the steps are working, my control here, my pressure here, the control I use on the body, my body part I'm trying to control. All those things you kind of iron out when you're doing rolling. So to answer your question, I think open mat is almost always the best time because it's more informal. You can grab a partner, you guys can roll for multiple rounds, just start in the same position. Vice, during the week where you're working on technique, you normally, you start in whatever position the instructor has everybody start. You're working kind of on the technique that he or she wants you to work on. So yeah, open mat is the best time, I think.
One thing that I've noticed in training partners too is higher belts are more patient with lending their body for that repetition, that practice. Whereas a lot of times as a lower belt, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I did it 4 times on each side. I think I got it pretty good, And one of the brown belts, one of the black belts would be like, yeah, come on, let's do it a few more times, And I get worried that, I'm eating up their time, like they already know this. But I'm starting to observe too, it's that process for them just as much too. They need the movement. Sometimes they need to roll with somebody who's going to make shit up on them.
Yeah, that's very true. Like if you watch, some of the higher level brown and black belt, level matches, there's like very small margin of error. You don't see a whole lot of big mistakes. Right? So if you watch like a white or blue belt match, you see like, people just going all out,
Right.
A lot of mistakes, but you don't see that as much, at the black belt level. So higher belt, you need that sometimes. You need like that random response that you normally don't get, just to see how you would react to it, how you could transition to something else from it. So.
Because, and I love that too, because I will always catch myself and then be like, I know that didn't make sense, but what can we do with it?
Yeah.
And I love the cerebral aspect, just probably more than the physical aspect, because my athleticism is slower to develop. When you look at that from a teaching and training perspective, what's your responsibility as a coach to nurture someone who may have a slower developing athleticism so that they don't feel uncomfortable being in a space with much more athletically talented individuals. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. So athleticism does play a part in all sports.
And some of us
Yeah.
have it naturally much more than others.
Yeah, but if you look at, there's a lot of high level, any sport, pick a sport where they will tell you they weren't necessarily athletic starting out, but you refine, you become better at the small skills that it helps, especially in jiu-jitsu. Like you look at, some of the more athletic, what we consider strong,
Right.
bigger built guys and gals, and they don't do well on the mat because it's technique, So I think to your question, I think as an instructor, you have to be mature enough to know the abilities of the students that you're teaching and be patient enough to work with them.
Right.
So I teach, a lot of kids now. Teaching kids is way different from adults. Kids, they're still trying to find themselves, like,
And their personality is
Yeah.
forming. They're right and wrong. They're everything.
And their attention span is way shorter. Like adults that come in here, as an adult, when you come in, it's a conscious decision. Hey, I'm going to pay money to join, to learn jiu-jitsu or to get better at it. As a kid, it's
And
more
you're
as like a
determined
sport.
to make that financial investment
Exactly.
worthwhile. Whereas the
Yeah.
kid,
Kid, they don't care. The parents are paying for it, so that's like,
We're
a
here.
Yeah, that's a different universe. They don't even think about like the financial responsibility to be able to train. The second part is like, kids more often than not play, or participate in more sports than the adults that come in here.
Right.
So, jiu-jitsu can be a part of like 4 or 5 other sports that the kid is doing. So sometimes they see it as another sport. But I think when they get older and they start to catch on to it, and you see it clear, you can tell when the kids start to like notice, hey, I'm pretty good at this.
Right.
I'm getting good at this, or I'm
They
progressing.
feel it.
Yeah. That is definitely satisfying as an instructor, but it's even more satisfying for the kids when they
Right.
see, when they realize that they're getting
Yeah.
better.
I think, like for me too, one thing when I first started training, Fredson complimented my ability to kind of see the details, and Marcos Calvo, Bellator bantamweight world champ, he's also said that to me. Like he said, you watch so well, and I think that reinforcement of if you can't fully do all of it right now, then spend your time paying attention and
Absolutely.
watching. For me, it gave me another way to be useful on the mat, even when the physicality was not quite within my grasp yet. And I think that's the mark of a great coach, is saying, what is your strength and how can you focus on it no matter the situation.
Absolutely.
So,
I joke and tell people I train, or I roll at least 20 rounds a day every day. Some of them are on the mat, some of them are in my head.
It's true.
And that's part of being a student of the sport. Like you can sit on the side and watch, even just by watching other people roll. You're like, man, I've never done that before. Let me try this. But that's when you become a student of it and you start like picking up on the small details. If you don't get it from the beginning, I think that's when you become better and a lot more stuff opens up for you.
Right, right. So someone starting training, where would you say, because like we talked about the unpredictability of rolling with a lower belt who's just gonna make something up, where would you say start focusing here, and don't worry about, everybody wants to have an amazing arm bar, an amazing leg lock. You're not gonna get it. Like, you're not gonna get it.
Yeah. For me, I tell people I recommend that you start on your back, in what's known as like the pin position. So whether it's somebody has side control or they're fully mounted on you, you want to be in the worst possible situation. When you start getting comfortable, like working out from somebody mounting you, somebody having your side control where your back is pinned to the mat, and once you start realizing that, hey, I can get out of this and not get submitted, that's when the confidence builds up. I think from there you started like whatever the most uncomfortable position is, and then you develop a good guard game. Developing a good guard game will, one, keep you alive if it's on actual, real life situation. On the mats, you can transition to different positions from there as well too. So it all depends. That's just me personally. I think when you put a person in like the most in a position where they're being dominated, the pin position is what I refer to it as. You start building confidence there. You flush out a lot of stuff. Like a lot of people there will quit automatically.
Yeah.
Their back is pinned to the mat. Every day they come in, they train.
And they don't like it.
They don't like it, but
No.
you need to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You need to be in that position. So.
Well, one thing that I think of with that too, right? Like that's a position that most of us, whether training, jiu-jitsu, competition, or life, like if we really need these skills, being pinned as a human being is a very uncomfortable position. But approaching developing a new skill from, I'm going to start learning my way out from the worst position possible so that it's only up from there.
Exactly.
Because if you only start training from training partners allowing you to get attacks and submissions and things like that, it's going to be a shock when you get put on your back.
Yeah.
You know?
As an instructor, though, there's a fine line. So you don't, when the person comes in, maybe I kind of overspoke, but every day when that person is rolling, you don't want to have them like with
You
their
don't wanna
back
smash
pinching.
them.
Yeah, every day they're just getting like destroyed, and they're
No.
never going to come back. But you want to start in like a position where they're like they're not comfortable. You transition, roll with other training partners, and this is where it gets into the science of being an instructor. You put a student in that position, but you also put them with a student where you know they can get out.
Right.
Then you start building the confidence.
Or where they can really be a good match.
Yeah,
for
they
each
can
other.
transition. Like if I put the smallest brand new student with Ryan, who's like a big guy, or Inlo,
If you put me with Orion,
yeah,
like he's what, 6'7"?
he's pretty tall.
Yeah, and I'm 5'2".
Yeah, if every day you come in, you roll with Orion from your back, in mount or either side control, you're not going to stick around.
Well, or even when I have success in a role like that, I know they've let me. So that confidence doesn't come as quickly.
As genuine, yeah.
Or as genuinely as I can have a role with a higher belt that's bigger and heavier, who I recognize that they're letting me work to a certain extent, so that then when I go roll with another similarly skilled person, I have some confidence going back into it, and being willing and able to take the losses, if you view them as a loss, in order to get to a point where you can start having the successes.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that mindset is missing in a lot of social life right now, is taking the losses because you recognize them as part of the process to
100%.
success.
Yeah.
So you and your wife have an amazing company, Process Over Price, LaRutina. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the brand started out a LaRutina. We've kind of transitioned to Process Over Prize, but the two birds on there represent our daughters. Raven and Robin. There's a raven bird and a robin bird. Process Over Prize is just kind of a phrase that we both adopted throughout life. Marine Corps, just understanding that the process, going through the process, whether there's hardship, whether it's times are going good. That is weighed more than any prize that you'll get, throughout life or competition or whatever. And then LaRutina, which was Spanish for the routine, was more so for my wife with the Spanish heritage. She's Venezuelan, so we wanted to add like a Spanish twist to
that
it. So,
element. That's really cool. But your sports are different.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
How does that work for you? Because with her doing strength and conditioning so well, have you been able to improve your secondary training? Because a lot of people who do jiu-jitsu really start doing cross training and other things to improve their skill set.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. So I would, I always worked out growing up playing sports, but again, becoming more of a student of it, getting older as well too. I've gotten a lot wiser in lifting, and it's definitely helped. Her having the skill set of being a coach. To hone in on some of the things that I was doing wrong or took for granted. And the other big aspect was just nutrition. Cutting weight was never really efficient, but having her as a nutritionist or a nutrition coach definitely helps out. It makes it a lot easier when it comes to cutting weight for competition. So now
she's become more of an athlete as an adult, whereas you've always been an athlete and just kind of graduated through. What do you think the difference is in the perspectives coming at athleticism at a different point or a different stage in life as far as the mental maturity with the process?
I would say hers, if I had to pick between the two, hers, I think was a better situation. I started playing sports at like 7, 8 years old, and there was a point where I was burnt out.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I don't want to do nothing, you
Yeah.
know? So I think her starting a little later, it's like new, it's like fresh, you know? There's no time to like, hey, I've been
So
doing
you
this,
felt
right?
young and invincible and got broken down and
Yeah,
were like,
yeah,
I'm out.
yeah, exactly,
And she
yeah.
kind of came from, I'm not invincible,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
just want to move.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Do
Yeah,
you think that that created a different, because I mean in Jiu Jitsu we hear about blue belt blues, right? Get to a point and then back off on training.
Yeah.
But that sounds like young athlete blues too. Coming at it from a perspective of what's my competition expectation, what's my result expectation. I mean, kids 7 or 8, we have all these dreams of grandeur on the field of competition. And older, maybe a little bit more realistic, do you think?
For sure, and I think that's the one aspect that I think that helped me. I started wrestling super young, and I always said like wrestling for me was like the best thing for life, preparing me for life. Like you're an individual out on the mat, you have a team, you practice day in and day out as a team, you have a coach, but when you step on that mat, it's you against the other person. So,
and your team's watching.
Yeah, your team's watching. Everybody's watching, but they can't do anything to help you, man. All they can do is cheer you on. But when you step out there, it is you, you know.
But in that, because I've watched you compete, I think I've seen almost all of your tournaments in the past year.
Yeah.
And there are times when I can tell when you're fired up.
Yeah.
But then there's other times when you're looking. And there's an awareness and alertness to what your coaches and your teammates are capable of seeing that you're not in that moment. How does that play, that trust in the team? Because that is an element that I love about Jiu Jitsu. It's a team, it's an individual team sport. It truly is. That trust, knowing which voices to listen to, because tournaments can get crazy, and there's a lot of screaming, and especially black belt rounds. Like there's a lot more interest, and everybody's much more excited about. Where do you know where to listen and where to calm down and focus on that help that is available?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. You developed that in the gym, training together. That level of trust doesn't come, from just any haphazard person when you're out on the mat,
You're not going to hear a random left leg.
Yeah. You don't hone in on stuff like, you're like, yeah, whatever, man.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's a level of respect, a level of trust, and it's knowing that instructor has been through the same fire that you're walking in, And hindsight is always 20/20 if you think about it. When you walk off the mat, you're like, man, that person was telling me to do this. Yeah, if I had done it, I actually would have won. But when you're in the moment on the mat, it's tough. I'll tell you, I saw that more so 2 weeks ago. My daughter competed in Stockton, and she was like, I couldn't hear anything, on the outside of the mat. I'm like, yeah, I've been there, But also knowing that too as an instructor, that you can't. I watch like the coaches that are like every second of the match they're screaming something. Like it's like information overload. You got to know when to let your student just work through it. You prepare them in the gym, so they're out there because they want to compete. They're good enough to compete. So there's times where you got to let them work through it, and there's other times where like, man, maybe he or she doesn't see this. So yeah, now I'm going to tell them to pay attention here.
Well, and I think it's important too. There's a respect in the process of who their coach is, right? Like, I would never, ever, ever try to scream over Fredson. No. Where's the support? And I watch the way you compete. I watch the way Fredson continues to compete, and I watch both of you at tournaments competing, and then rushing to coach a student and their competition. I love that aspect of leading by example. That you go on the mat too, and you take the role, the gamble of, am I good enough for this opponent on this day? You know, what do you think as a coach when you are coaching, especially in tournaments, especially with kids? How do you approach that dynamic with perhaps over enthusiastic parents who don't train?
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough one because as a parent, I'll never discredit a parent, even if they're wrong, for being there to support their kids. Right. Maybe afterwards, I'd be like, yeah, you probably told them the wrong thing. But if you break it down to just like the simplicity of it, they are there supporting their child. You know? So that's cool to see, because their parents, who wouldn't even be there to do that, you know.
Right.
But it is borderline to where they're screaming random stuff, or they're just screaming too much, and the kids getting nervous as well too. So at that moment, you can't really do a whole lot, but maybe just afterwards, talking to that parent, or before too. So I'm like, I know this parent, when they bring their kids to class, they're always at the side of the mat, hey man, why don't you just let me do this?
Take a breath.
Yeah. You can kind of be encouraged, but at the tournament, there's going to be a lot going on. So how about you just let me handle the coaching piece?
I think my perspective watching that, because I could be that way. I know I could. I can get mouthy. Especially when I'm excited about something, and when it's your kids.
Yep, exactly.
But having walked onto the mat myself, there's a lot of times that I'm like, whoa, you really don't know what you're asking of them.
Yeah.
And gaining that perspective, I think, but also you showing your willingness to compete still, and your need for coaching. How does that work though for you? Because at your level, having people that can still see and coach you is getting harder.
It is, and it's not. You can learn a lot from lower belts. I think say it's one of my students coaching me on the mat. It's them having the level of maturity to know, and I'm just here kind of hey, let him know how much time he has left, or let him know what the score is, or hey, your hips are kind of high. If they know some of the basics,
they start learning what's pertinent
information
because they've been there too.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's still coaching. You can be there as a lower belt student and still coach. Help them out. But going back to the original part of your question, it is tough, doing both at a tournament. And the point you hit on about setting the example, I think it's very important for students to see that. I think you look at some black belts who have reached the black belt level and they stop competing. It's a couple things. I think the ones who've been doing it a lot longer, like I talked about being burnt out, they're like, man, I've been training and competing since I was 9-10 years old. I'm done, man. You have those, which I can respect those guys. You've been there, you put in the time. Now you're just focusing on passing your knowledge on to the students. Unfortunately, you have some of the other spectrum where you have black belts who man, I made it to black belt. I don't need to prove anything to anybody else. There's very few. I've encountered very few of those, but those I would never train with those type of black belts, just because of the mindset. You have to be humble. You have to be still willing to learn. When I got promoted to black belt, I realized how much I didn't know about Ju Jitsu. I had done a lot, I competed a lot, and competed a ton of matches. I trained a lot, but I realized the gaps in my game, that I was still a student myself. I graduated high school. Now I'm working on math or graduate level in Ju Jitsu. My journey just began, as a black belt. So.
Yeah. Well, but the responsibility.
For sure.
Because we see that, and different professors, different schools promote for different reasons and for different things. And some are like, well, you've got to be able to smash everybody at the higher level or whatever. And others are like, no, you're ready to step into this responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think that mindset of viewing your progress within the sport as increasing in responsibility really helps to contain the ego, perhaps.
For sure.
I mean, we all have it, and we'll all have moments that we're really proud of, but I think that mentality of, I'm stepping into this responsibility, makes for a healthier
It
community.
does, and that plays a significant part, I think, in being promoted to black belt. There's people, if you look at their jiu-jitsu competition resume alone, they should be a black belt already.
Right.
You know, if you look at the time, amount of competitions, but the one missing aspect, in my opinion, is their personality, their character on and off the mats,
Okay.
and then just their mindset overall. You know.
So what are you looking for in that? When, as a professor, when you're promoting, what are you looking for in the character? And because a lot of people go, I've put all the sweat, all the skin, because we get mat burns and there's skin left on the mat. Like, what are you looking for?
You have to be. You got to be a person of good character. Good character is when you're in the gym and when you're off the mat. So, you know, when I talk to the kids, you know, we start every class and I ask them, how are you supposed to lead? And they say, by example. You know, we get more into detail about leading by example, you know, throughout the class. But if you're a kid and you train with me and you're going to school and you're picking fights, first and foremost, you're going to come to training that night and you're going to roll with every kid in the class until I get tired, and then you're going to do it again. So you shouldn't be going to school picking fights. You shouldn't be going to school like
And we're going to differentiate between picking a fight and defending yourself.
100%. Yeah.
Because that is a very important distinction to
100%.
make. Yeah.
So I should say bullying. If you're going to school and you're like bullying kids, and I know because school's right by my house, so I see all the kids that train with me. You know.
And y'all don't realize when we drive by the playground, we actually look. I do when my kids are like, if I'm driving by and there's kids on the playground, I'm double checking if mine are out.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, but kids shouldn't be, you know, bullying. You shouldn't be like, you know, disrupting and you know, being a bad kid at school. When you come to class, you know, you can't be like, you know, acting crazy on the mats and stuff like that. And as an adult, like you should treat everybody the same way you should want to be treated. You know, that's kind of tough to say nowadays because some people don't treat other people the way that they, you know,
they expect to be treated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it just as a whole, I don't even like surround myself with people like that. You know, if somebody were to ask to train with me and I don't think they have good character, and I would respectfully ask them to go find somebody else to train with.
I think that that's very important to recognize in passing on the skill set, because it's wonderful for self-control, it's wonderful for self-discipline, but if someone's demonstrating they don't have it, they don't want to develop that self-control and self-discipline, why would you give the tools to them to become more dangerous in the pursuit of their selfishness?
Yeah, some of that's tough though, because you have people who jiu-jitsu is a great equalizer because it could take the most aggressive and like egocentric person and make them like the most humble person. It can break you down. But I think it's knowing the people who, if they start training jiu-jitsu, that they will go through that transformation, and people who are just like they're agnostic to any other way of seeing
recognizing
things.
their adaptation to the process.
Exactly. Yeah. If you think they're kind of like a lost cause, man, it's tough, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
I always love training with you when you're in town. I love watching you compete. I do. I love watching you compete. There have been some fabulous Martin moments on the mat.
For sure. Yeah.
The guy tried to be your hat one time. That's my favorite.
Oh yeah. He tried to do guillotine. Yeah,
He
I picked
did.
him up. Yeah.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can't wait till next time you're back with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right.